choyo sampo pagyo trashi paya tuche tempe trile yarngoda pelge drolor tampe zebrache palden lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha sane karma uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om guru vajradara sumati munisha sane uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Om guru vajradara sumati munisha sane karma Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om guru vajradara sumati munisha sane Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om guru vajradara sumati munisha sane Shri badra varsa manya sarva Siddhi hum Dhagi Jitsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tsechi Nyingne Sowa Debet Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshune Yela Sambe Dudem Malepa Gemel Hunge Drupra Jingel Soni Sodan Dikdun Shabetse Dunge Namge Yinsu Lekshun Labchen Soni Yonsu Tsopa Dan Chera Nyetun Changra Jingi Loba Jancho Pargi Ninsen Tuguntu Niyu Peme Siudrul Jancho Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen De La Drubra Jingil Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chemin Samjurngenba Shiva Chedan Timbe Duden Malupa Bemel Hungi Drubra Jingilo Dorna Tingne Tsira Tamche Dan Techi Pardune Gav Tamche Rese Kyamne Lama Kele Me Tukje Chingi Dala Siksu Solo Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dachal Jetsun Lame Tuje Rab Gongne Kudan Sungi Nawa Dramet Nyamsu Nyongwe Kesan Tobra Shu Kewa Kundu Yand Drame Cheki Pela Longchech Sadan Lamge Yunden Rabzon Dorje Changi Koba Nyur Tobe Shu Pakyuke kudan dagi aluya pakyuke sundan dagi pakyuke tudan dagi tün yerme çıktı çingi aluya makyuke kudan dagi alu makyuke Sundan dagi ma köke tudan dagi tün yerme çıktı çingil Om muni muni maha muni shakya muni svo Sange chodan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapso chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola penchira sange druparasho Sange chodan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapso chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola penchira sange druparasho Sange chodan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapsuchi dagi chinso gibe sonamki drola penchira sang druparashu
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment, with the practice of generosity and other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Haye ke dan lunan je ke rubunda na mi ke na. Ruwa kun ke danam chi tsamba tam che ke tu da ge che te.
Good morning. Once I was at the monastery where I studied in the south of India, and my master, Lakpala, the master with whom I lived, he taught also mostly philosophy. So I had a main philosophy teacher and then other two masters. But I lived with him. I really shared my daily life with him. We had the same house. But he taught me so much with his advice and just by example. So he wasn't an actual a formal teacher of mine. So when we talk about non-formal education, we need to be open to learn, regardless of the context. So anyway, one day he said to me, "Look, be careful. Pay attention the way you study, the way you do things, because you need to be like an ant instead of a flea, because uh, an ant makes many constant small steps, instead a flea makes huge jumps, leaps, and then stays still. You know, I don't know if you have. I've seen many fleas in my life. I don't know if you have in your life. It makes these huge jumps, but then stays still, and then and maybe that and that jump, maybe it was the wind that brought him that. Maybe it wasn't actually a road that he was following. Well, instead, an ant has this ability to make many small steps, one after the other. I don't know. Have you ever seen an ant stay still? Maybe they stay still just for an instant to see where they need to go, but normally they're in constant movement, just one step after the other. And this shows the importance of having constancy instead of wanting to make huge leaps. There was a monk at the monastery of Sera, and his nickname was, at a certain point, was Gatok. Gatok means the raucous one, because he had moments where he would get up before everyone else, which was very, very early. That would be about like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then he would start memorizing. Remember, in the traditional system of the monastic studies, when studying by heart is very important. First, we memorize text to then remember, we're talking about a tradition where originally the books and texts were not easily to come by, and so even now today there's still this tradition to memorize text. Even when you go to ceremonies, you're not allowed to bring text. It needs to all be memorized. And so he would get up really, really early sometimes, because he wanted to memorize a certain number of pages, and he would, we memorize out loud. So, and the Tibetans have no respect whatsoever towards sleep, the sleep of others. If you're sleeping in the same room or same house with others, and you get up to make noise while others are sleeping, is no problem. So, And they just don't see any problem. The one who's sleeping and the one who's making noise, for them, there's no problem at all. You know, so this monk would get up super early and he would just be memorizing out loud. And but he had a very, very loud voice. So very, very early, he would spend hours memorizing, and then in the evening as well, he would put in a tremendous amount of effort and stay awake later than everyone else. But then what would happen is that almost every time is that, uh, you know, maybe he said, okay, I'm going to study for 1 month or whatever. He was not able to reach the number of pages that he had set as an objective, you know. And then for months he wouldn't open a book. And he would say, well, okay, I'm just not able, I'm not going to manage, you know. He put in a tremendous amount of effort, but then he would just drop it. And then he would sleep late, he would do almost nothing. Um, and then at a certain point, say, oh no, I need to study. Um, and then he would say, no, I have to study. But you know, he wasn't able the way he had wanted. You know, unfortunately, then he ended up in the United States selling hot dogs. You know, unfortunately, that that's what happened to him. And this is an example of how useless it is to put in so much effort without constancy. Another one, for example, there was there's another story. A nickname of a monk given was a the, the iron circle. Um, when you come into the monastery, you need to memorize at least 4 lines a day. For example, Sangye Soge Chonam. This is the minimum that one needs to memorize every day, like the 4 lines of refuge. And he wasn't able. It was incredibly difficult for him. And then one day, his teacher just didn't know what else to do. He took a little circle made of iron, and he said, "You put this on your text, and the words that are inside this ring, you memorize those." And then for him, just every day, and it didn't matter if it was vacation or the New Year's a holiday, he would memorize what was inside that ring. And so he had this nickname of the iron ring. And every day, you know, little by little, he would memorize the book. After 20 years, he knew more than many others who at that same time were able to memorize 20 pages a day, you know, you know. And so was able to realize something important. So these two examples are given to show how important constancy is, more than putting in a tremendous amount of effort for a short amount of time. Because we are made, how can I say, our body, our mind, and everything around us is not made like it's not immediate. I mean, these are everything comes from gradual, you know, transformations. So if I want to, if I'm an athlete and I want to go to the Olympics, you know, is it enough to train for a month, day and night, or are we talking about years of training and constancy? So the same thing happens for the environment, for example. Look around. I was talking to Pete the other day, and he said, you know, the apples here aren't, um, you know, you know, the apples here are not very good. And he's saying, you know, they're too young. They don't have the wisdom yet, you know, to um, it's a gradual process. We need to take care. And he was explaining that the land here, to be able to cultivate the land well, to make vegetables, for the soil to be really good, to be able to cultivate it, we need at least 5 years of 5 years to prepare the soil. But we live in a time where we want everything to be ready for yesterday. We want things immediately. We don't want to wait. waiting seems like the torture of the 21st century. And even we have this concept that the faster it is, the better it is. I see, for example, when it's a while it's a while that I don't have to do it anymore. But when I used to have to buy airplane tickets, I would always look for the shortest trip. How I would look for the you know I would look for the shortest amount of time to wait between flights. I mean, there's a kind of logic to that. I don't really like airports, um, but we have somewhere, it seems to me, this feeling today that the f- the faster it is, the sooner it can get done, the better it is. So internet needs to be faster and faster. We need to be able to have things. We need to be able to travel quickly. We want to buy something, as soon as I want it, I have it there in front of me. And we have this too. When you buy something buy something online and it doesn't arrive in one day. It says, "Oh, it was written one day. How come it didn't arrive? What's wrong?" So what I mean to say is I see this also talking, during the construction of the temple. I had to manage with I manage and deal with many construction companies and small businesses and artisans. And the first, when people would come to me, they would say, well, when will it be done? When will it be, you know, seems like everything needs to be immediate. But what's the problem that this brings to us? Because it's a mental attitude. It takes us to not seeing, not even conceptually, but to not see that things need a process. They need a gradual, their gradual process, and and that time to support this process is much longer than the actual seeing of the result. If you want to have wonderful fruit on a tree, the actual, you know, it takes time to get to the fruit, to taking care of the tree, seeing the flowers, and from the flowers the fruit. Once there was, Master explained to me, it's like in a lineage where it's, um, it's like the job of a gardener is the job of a gardener is to make the flowers grow. So what do you need? You need good soil, you need water, you need fertilizer. It doesn't have so so a gardener, he doesn't make flowers. It has nothing to do with making flowers. He takes care of everything else. And so when we have an objective, our focus should not be in the objective itself, but should be in the causes and conditions that are necessary to be able to manifest that result. So often we have this attitude that we want something right away, which is immediate, and we want and we want to jump the necessary steps. Because when nature teaches us that things come gradually, that we need to take care, we need to cultivate, we need constancy so that something can come. But, water comes from the tap. So the apple comes from the supermarket. we know that it's not like this, but our way of relating to things when we have, a salad in front of us. I mean, how often do we connect with all of the causes and conditions that were necessary to bring that plate to us? I mean, how much work is behind that plate. I mean, it doesn't come to us spontaneously. Instead, we're much more connected to the result, and we're totally disconnected from the causes and that necessary parcours to get to to the results. So I've told this story several times. It touched me deeply. I was in Tibet, and I went to my master who was giving me teachings very early. It was 8 in the morning. It wasn't so early, but let's remember that in Tibet, the 8 in the morning is actually 5:30 because today all of China has the same hour as Beijing. But if you look at the position on the actual globe, the real time, there would be 3.5 hours of time lapse there. To the time zone would be 3.5 hours earlier. So I mean, the 8 o'clock in the morning, the sun is just about to come up, and I was there. Um, the sun was just about to come up, to rise, and I will go to my teacher. When I got to his house, this is the abbot of the monastery. It was something that's really nice because he lived in the same house in the same bed. Um, that his bed was at least 400 years old. It's where all the previous abbots of the monastery lived and slept and gave teachings, because it's you know it also because it had very, very strong energy, and because of its cultural importance, you couldn't like restructure, etc. So, and he was on a when I got there, I saw this very young boy who was carrying about 20 liters of water on his back, up these very, very steep stairs. It's almost like a ladder. We're about 4,200 meters. And every once in a while, he'd let me go by him. And at a certain point, I got there. I see the bedroom. In front of the bedroom of my teacher, there was a kind of terrace. It was the water for everything, for washing, for drinking. There was no water from the tap inside the house. And after the teachings, I asked my teacher. I said, Genla, why can't we bring the water here? Just a faucet. I see that just in the courtyard below there is a faucet. It's not difficult to bring the water up. At least for you, the abbot of the monastery. I mean, for you could have water easily. And he gave me an answer that I would have never expected. He said, if young people don't learn how to have constancy and effort in the simplest of things like having water, how are they going to put effort and constancy into things like the studies and meditation? So I understood that water had nothing to do with this story. What was important was this inner training that one does. And we live in a time instead where we live we live in a time where we follow the rule of maximum comfort and minimum effort. And so but we find ourselves in situations where that rule doesn't apply, because either you put effort into it or it doesn't work. There's no easy exit. There are some there are some roads in life that require constancy, effort. They're not immediate. And here, if we're not used to it, it becomes very tiresome. So one important quality to develop is called enthusiastic effort or zeal. Now let's say hello to the kids who are here for a week. Lama is inviting them to come without without any hurry. Good morning, he's saying. Before talking about enthusiastic effort, first of all, it's this the fact is that anything we want to do, regardless of the direction we want to go, this requires energy and effort. The alternative is staying like a leaf in the wind that is just blown from one place to another according to the conditions and the situations. One reacts to the world. Instead, when the opposite of this is setting an objective, even small goals, and we direct our effort in that direction. We take our own energy and we put it in that direction. What's the opposite of effort is laziness. And there's something actually even worse than laziness, because in laziness, one knows what one is supposed to do, but just doesn't want to it. Because laziness is that state where I know I should do something, but I just don't want to. It's this union of this certainty of having to do something united with this lack of desire for the same. So I find 1,000 excuses. I don't want it. I know I should do it, but I don't do it. That's laziness. But even before that, it's when one doesn't even want it. More than not wanting it, they don't even know. We don't even know, and stays in a kind of a, s- in a state of like an apathetic state, where the objective of life is to have fun or avoid discomfort and just experience pleasure. But every moment in our life we're transforming, and we transform according to the experiences that we live. And even when we see reality in this present moment, it's said that this is according also to some scientific studies, and I tell you my own interpretation. It's explained that, for example, when we see this present moment, in reality, somehow there's a part of the future that we're seeing. How's that? Let's talk about our own, like our sight. When we see something, there's some studies that were done in the 1970s. It said that the mind, the brain, when it sees something, there's the light that comes, and then there's a part of our mind that tries to foresee what is going to happen. So they saw this, that when they by putting like a red light, I can't remember if it was right light, a red or white, and if it was like they would turn it on and turn it off with a certain constancy. There were two points of light that were distance, and they realized that there's a moment where you see the red light that goes from point A to B, and then the blue, you see it go from one end to the other one. Instead, they're they're just turning on and off. And there's at a certain point, you can predict already the light that's going to come. So they showed all these studies that were showing that you can kind of predict, you can foresee what is going to come. And yesterday, I talked to a friend who lived for a year and a half for various reasons or sickness. She could see double, and when she was cured from this, um, the doctor said, "Okay, you're cured, but I can't fix the memory of what your brain saw. So you will still have moments where you see double, not because of your eyesight, but actually because of the memory that you had." What I mean to say is, when we live reality, there's a part of that that's mixed up with previous experiences and memories. So when we talk about what we want and the direction that we're going in, every moment, everything that we do, every experience shapes our future and our present. They're not in. It's not. They're not experiences that are indifferent that just end there. For this reason, every experience that we have is really, really important. For this reason, I mean, this is why I go back to the point that that, that I've shared many, many times, and the question is, what do I want? And when I was studying the 51 mental factors, which are basically this, the the part of a Buddhist philosophy that explains the mind at there's then there's also we talk about the aspects of the mind, like the ingredients of the main dish, and they're called mental factors, and there's a mental factor called effort, and then there's also laziness, a mental factor laziness, and there I start to see it because I recognized among my um, among my various mental defilements, the worst is laziness. And people say, "Oh, that can't be true. You put so much energy into things." But I know myself, and I'm working on it. I mean, I've many years that I've talked about it, and it is getting better. But I realized, I mean, I asked myself, why am I lazy? How is it that I'm lazy? And where's the antidote? I mean, no one puts energy into something if he or she doesn't want it, if he doesn't desire it. What I had studied and understood in a formal way is said enthusiastic effort comes from aspiration, that comes from faith. Enthusiastic effort, it translated as having joy in virtue. Is effort is defined as having pleasure in putting energy into what is virtuous but not necessarily easy. Shantideva, this famous text, the way of the Bodhisattva says, he says in Tibetan, which is so beautiful. So two-syllable Tsun Kang, which means, what is enthusiastic effort? Tsun is the enthusiastic effort. Sun Drup, Tsun. Kang is, what does it mean? Sun Kang. What is enthusiastic effort? Here you see how wonderful Tibetan is. Gela Troa. Gewa is virtuous. Gela Troa is joy. So what is enthusiastic effort? Is having joy in virtue. In other words, it means putting energy with joy, joyously, in that which is positive but not easy. I don't know. Do you need enthusiastic effort to eat ice cream? If you like ice cream, of course. I don't need zeal and enthusiastic effort. It comes spontaneously. Enthusiastic effort is needed when there's something virtuous, positive, but that is not so easy. And I learned this when I was studying. One day, one of my teachers came to me, Geshe Tupten Rimchen. He's actually the abbot of the monastery in Switzerland, Rincon. At the time, he was the master of discipline, and so when there was an exam every six months, there was an exam of memorization and the minimum every 6 months was to give 100 pages word by word, and he was actually receiving the students for the exam. And he came to me and he said, in about a month and a half, there's the memorization exam. And I said, yes, I know. You know, he said, he asked me how many pages I had memorized at the time. I said, because I'm Western, we don't have this habit of memorizing. It's difficult. He said, how many pages? I said, okay, 24. He said, the minimum is 100. And they count they count the actual pages front and back. I said, you know, for myself, I kind of had this excuse that the most important exam for me was the exam of debate, and I was always And I was always in the top of the class for debate, even though for memorization I was at the bottom of the class. And so I had this excuse that, memorization bored me and it was more important, debate was more important. And then he answered me, remember that if you don't put effort into what's difficult for you, where are you going to put effort? That effort. Where do you put effort if not in the difficult things? And that made me reflect that, even for debate, I would go to lessons I didn't even need to go to. I'd go to, um, you know, um, you know, I there was one class that there were too many students, and so my master gave that same lesson twice. I would go to both of them, or I'd go to classes for the higher years. So it was an effort. It came to me with a lot joyously, and then with that phrase, what he said to me, I I thought, he's really right. And with that, I set myself to memorize like I had never done before, really like a flea. And so for a month and a half, I did much more than I had ever done. And I got to the exam with much more than I memorized 100 pages in that month and a half already with the 24 that I had. That But something I have to say, the joy that came to me from putting effort and seeing that I was going in that positive direction, it was just enormous. But it's important to maintain it with constancy. When we say put effort with joy, put energy in that which is virtuous but not easy, I mean myself, not easy, but what does it mean to put effort into something virtuous? What makes something virtuous? What determines something being virtuous or not? I think a simple definition, you know, virtuous or positive, let's call it positive, is that which in its interaction brings an increase of wellness and happiness to in a short, medium, and long term, always giving priority to the long term, or it's something that in its interaction diminishes suffering. If it's something that brings pleasure in a short term but brings suffering long term, it's not virtuous. If something is tiresome, so brings a little short term suffering but long term joy and happiness, then it is virtuous. In other words, having enthusiastic effort is being able to discern what is good for me. Having joy in abandoning what is harmful to me and to others. And here, there's a very important aspect, that which this is let's remember what Buddha says. What Buddha says. I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. Lama Ganshin, he reminded us of this in 1,000 different ways. In self-healing, we're talking about, when we're talking about reaching this state of reaching states of great joy and well-being, it depends on us. And we need to remember how important it is to have constancy. And I'd like to bring a point here. There are two aspects. One is putting effort, putting energy with constancy into something virtuous. And a fundamental aspect of this is one fundamental aspect is a non-attachment to the result. Because when we put energy in a direction and we have attachment to the result, we want that thing to happen in this way in this amount of time. As soon as things don't go as we expect, and then at that point we just we abandon it, we let go. It's important to understand that we don't have the certainty of when we're going to get there or how we're going to get there. What's important is having that certainty that we're walking in the right direction, that we're putting our energy towards that which is virtuous, that we're living in virtue, that every moment of our lives we're cultivating healthy habits. We're walking towards a physically, emotionally, and mentally healthy um, way. And and every day that goes by, we're not reinforcing the negative habits that we've had. This is fundamental. And it's not that's not saying little, you know. It's important to have this, to set this direction, to be going in this direction. And here within, what's important is asking ourselves what we want. What do I want? Because according to what I want, that's where I'm going to put my energy. But the non attachment to the result means that I don't have that idealized image of how and when it should be. Because when we have an idealized image on how things should be, when they don't go the way we expect, we're upset. We get upset. We say, I'm not able, it's not possible, it's not going to go well, I'm never going to make it. And we just let go, we abandon it. Instead, perseverance, constancy, enthusiastic effort requires a kind of non attachment to the result, to this idealized result. I don't know if this is clear. Because we need, it's difficult. At a certain point, we need to believe that it's possible and have a strong desire towards that, and at the same time, not stay attached to the idealized image of the when and the how. Somehow, you know, with this hope that sooner or later it's going to come. But we know that when if we know that when we plant something, sooner or later the fruit will come. You know, if I actions are never in vain. What happens is once we have clarity, you know, the clarity of why we should put energy into something, then you know we this fundamental point of once we realize I'm putting energy into what I want, how do we cultivate wanting positive things? Because there, we see in our lives there are things that we like and we do, but they're harmful, to us, right? Here's just a very simple example for myself. I've had many experiences that it's like, for example, I need to sleep a lot. For example, if at a certain point, if I physically don't feel well, just let me sleep for 2 days, and I'll get better. I'll pick up. But I realize that if I wake up, the earlier I wake up in the morning, the more energy I have during the day. But I remember as a child, for example, I used to really like to sleep when I was a young boy. Getting up early was a torture, In the monastery, I had to wake up at 5:30, but on my free day, I would sleep late, which actually was just about till 7. But I realized that for myself, getting up, when I wake up early, it's pleasurable. And we see that, but there are other things And other things we know we feel it pleasurable, but they don't, but they're harmful. So enthusiastic effort is based on aspiration. So it's another way of saying desire. You aspire to something. And this aspiration is based on faith. Faith is not understood as like believing in something that can't be understood. It's not blind faith. It's faith understood as believing in the existence and the potential and the characteristics of something. Like before buying something, what pushes us to spend money to purchase something? The I mean, this maybe money that we've saved, maybe something that mm, what pushes us to buy something maybe is maybe something that's really quite expensive. First of all, we need to believe that thing exists, that has this benefits, it has this function, it's going to help me here, its function is this. I believe in it. I believe in the existence, the functions, the characteristics, and at that point I can put the energy and purchase it. Similarly, to have faith, we need to know. We need to know the existence, the qualities, the functions, and the importance of what we want. For example, having faith in concentration before putting energy into developing concentration, we need to believe that it's possible to develop a good concentration. We look at what the what the qualities of concentration are, what the defects of having poor concentration are. So we get to the point where we really want to develop this concentration. The the difficulty that I see for many of us is that often we recognize the importance of concentration, for example, but we don't put energy into developing it. I mean, how many hours a day do you dedicate to improving your concentration? How many minutes? This means that this is something we don't want. But if I were to ask you, do you think it's more important to have a distracted mind or a concentrated mind? I mean, I don't think there's anyone here who would say that it's better to have a distracted mind. But, 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 having a concentrated mind, let's remember it's a state of relaxation, not of tension, where we tell the mind to go here and it goes there. I mean, this ability to direct the mind and be free of distractions is a powerful tool. But the problem of the lack of faith is not the lack of faith in concentration itself. It's the lack of faith in ourselves that we're able to do it. Very often, this lack of faith is lack of faith in oneself. Me, in that state of concentration, I'm never gonna get there. I mean, who, mm, you know, why should I try to sit for 2 hours a day concentrating on my breath? I can't even do it for 10 seconds before my mind runs off somewhere else. I don't know if you've tried it. You inhale, you exhale, you inhale, you exhale. That third respiration, the mind has already got flown somewhere else. So people think, oh, I'm never going to make it, so why should I even start? If I don't believe that I can get there, why should I start? It's like looking at the summit of a mountain. I'll never be able to get up there. So I'm not even going to make the first steps. So very often, what is missing is faith in ourselves, faith that we can make it. And what I've seen, generally speaking, is that both, people that I know and also with historical figures, in the Buddhist realm and non-Buddhist realm, and maybe in the realm of sports. Often, those who have managed to get great results were um, often these are the people who didn't start life with great with with ease, but people who had great dreams, who just kept going, were always able to maintain in this set goal, even though that things didn't come easily to them. So it's possible. So if I'm able to make a small step, which means I'm able to make another one and another one after that, and this takes us to believing in ourselves. But we need to do a kind of positive brainwashing with ourselves, where we need to remember why that thing is important to us and why it's possible, how it's possible to realize it. Take examples of those who have those who have managed, you know, so uh, so so we're going against that negative brainwashing that tells us that we're not able, it's not like this, and you know, you know that that negative brainwashing takes us far from our objective. But we need to start with very, very small objectives and simple objectives, even for a limited amount of time, because there are two important trainings here. One is training in virtue itself, where one needs effort, and another fundamental thing before this is training is is training in effort itself, like familiarizing ourselves with effort, putting effort in having effort, even in very small things like bringing water or doing things that we don't like, that that make our laziness come out. So it not because and we do it not because of that act itself, but because we want to familiarize ourselves with a different way of doing, because you know so that at the end of the day, what has a greater impact is not whether we like something or don't like something, but whether it's beneficial or harmful. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, when I see the context in which I grew up in India, in Brazil, but mostly in India, even I look at my grandparents and I imagine that here it's the same. Just a few generations, a couple generations ago, there weren't so many problems, let's say. People didn't make so many problems, oh, I don't like this. Oh, what do you mean you don't like it? You just do it. Or, oh, I'm tired. What do you mean you're tired? That's not, instead, we're so fragile today. It's frightening. We're frighteningly tired, fragile. Oh, I don't like it. Sometimes I hear children talking to their parents like, "Oh, I don't want to do this." What do you mean you don't want to do it? You know, Seems like the greatest torture in the world to have to do something that you don't want to do, or do something that you don't like, or do something that's tiresome. Seems like a torture, not just for children but also for adults. It seems like our freedom is being taken away from us because I need to do something I don't like. When instead, if we left if we left ourselves this if we left ourselves the space to do what we want, when we want it, how we want it, we would suffer even more. Our ability, instead of not giving importance to the difficulties that we find in front of us, or not give weight to whether something is pleasurable, not pleasurable, or tiresome, not tiresome. But because any objective that we set, of course, there will be things that are pleasurable, not pleasurable, tiresome or not. But following this attitude of, oh, I like, I don't like, we become very fragile. And often we get to having a kind of behavior. I don't know how to translate it. It was explained to me once, like as if it's as strong as an example, but it's like having like a newborn in in your arms, and you've bathed the baby. So you've got this baby with this dirty water. You say, I don't want the dirty water anymore, and so I throw the I throw the baby out with the bath water. So I don't want I don't there's something I don't want, but I get rid of something incredibly precious too, like a relationship, for example. um, Maybe there in a relationship there are many beautiful aspects, so because it becomes it but in the face of something difficult, or everything gets thrown away. And this comes from our lack of habit of facing difficulties, of accepting them along the path, where if I like it, if I don't like, or if it's pleasurable, not pleasurable, if it's tiresome or not, it's not important. What's important is it virtuous or not virtuous? Is it beneficial to me, or is it harm? Or when we set an important objective and we just deeply desire that, need to we prepare ourselves already that there will be difficulties, because let's remember that difficulties are relative. If they're big or small, that depends also on the value that we give to them. Because uh, when we find ourselves faced with a difficulty, what takes the space up in our life? The difficulty in itself, the subjective difficulty, or the time that we take up thinking, oh, it shouldn't be like this, or how can I do, or I can't do, just that we're just chewing, this problem instead of swallowing or spitting it out. What takes up more space? It's mental. There's a problem. We face the problem and then we move on. Oh, but it shouldn't have been like this. Why? You know, you know, Tell me, have you ever met anyone who's been able to do something without working for it? I think of Papanka Rinpoche, for example, who was in 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 these last generations was the master of all masters. There's He was extremely important master and practitioner, and he was the master of Chichen Rinpoche, who Chichen Rinpoche, who was the tutor of the Dalai Lama, of Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, and that's it. That 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 all the great lamas these past two generations came through Pabongka Rinpoche. At a certain point in his life, he was poor. He didn't have money for eating. I mean, he didn't have the resources for eating, and he dedicated his whole life to spiritual practice and to studying. Um, there at a certain point, um, there there was a time where he didn't sit down to not fall asleep while he was studying, but he also had trouble standing because he wasn't nourished well, and because he was studying so much. And so it said that he would walk around the walls of the monastery so that the walls were actually holding him up so he wouldn't fall. If we look also at the life of Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, it wasn't an easy life. I mean, he put so much energy, an enormous amount of energy into virtuous things. That some things went well, some things didn't go well, and he would say it's not important, whether things actually mature the way you want them. What's important is putting the energy into these things and walking in this direction. For this, it's said that without enthusiastic effort, you can't obtain anything. If we don't have enthusiastic effort, what happens is that we stay simply just repeating the same dynamics. But if we have dynamics and habits that are harmful, that increase our anger and our resentment and our sadness, etc., and we don't put effort into looking at ourselves in the eyes and changing these habits, which is very tiresome, is very difficult, and we need to train in that. This ability to put energy into what is virtuous but not easy, that allows us to transform ourselves and grow. So let's begin, first of all, by training to have enthusiastic effort with small things. So, for example, when we see that there's something that's good to do mentally, but first physically and verbally, let's not apply this law of minimum effort, maximum comfort. Let's try to increase this, try to develop this quality. For example, there's something that needs to be cleaned, and I don't want to do it. No, wonderful. I'm going to do it, not just to clean the place, but to train in developing this quality of effort. So it's a fundamental to try to invert this rule that we live by, this rule of maximum comfort, minimum force, minimum effort, because which brings much more suffering. Because many environmental problems, for example, come from following this rule of maximum comfort, minimum effort, trying to more and more to work less and have more comfort. It's just a few days ago, and now here I'm closing up, but I followed an interview that just really shook me up in some way. We're in a time where basically soon it seems that we'll be able to buy robots to do work at home. And so where there's an interview that talked about these robots and what they do, and these people who, they were talking about how useful they'll be at home, etc. What can a robot do? As if it were the most beautiful thing in the world. The robot can cook, can clean, and it can take care of a mother who's sick. And I was shocked, because what does this mean? This means more and more we try to have our pleasures and put less and less energy so like what the things I have to do, for example, which would be like taking care of parents, which we do less and less, So it would be something important for me, independently of it being important for them. But these are taking us away from fundamental human aspects, and we see how just more and more fragile we're becoming. This emotionally, the level of emotional fragility that we have is frightening. A woman who came here, who works with the young people around the world, she told me that 70 to internationally speaking, 70 and 80% of young people from like pre-adolescence to young like adulthood, 70 to 80% have psychiatric problems. That's no joke. And what I see is that we have, the, more and more people who have greater technical knowledge, abilities, but but you just need they're incredibly fragile. Like you can't even touch them, and then they fall apart. You know. So this law of maximum effort, maximum comfort, minimum effort, um, really keeps us from growing. Just how imagine how you would be if you had never encountered a problem, you know, you know, or or you wouldn't be able to get close to you without without screaming, because it's the difficulties. It's difficulties. It's our ability to face difficulties that helps us grow, that gives us strength. So we shouldn't be afraid of difficulties. We should be afraid of we should be afraid instead of laziness and not wanting to put energy into things. There we should really be afraid. We should rejoice in doing what's virtuous, even if it's tiresome. This is what I wanted to share with you today. And I want to remind you that these next weeks, in July and August, Lama Ganshin would often say, make your holidays holy days. That we'll try to have some teachings and retreats, and let's try to take advantage in the best way we can together. Because we live in a society, a system where, like also in the past, where we a good a good part of our life is dedicated to our livelihood, and then we have some of free time available, vacation time. And during this period, it's important to do things that relax us, that make us feel well. So now it's time for our dedications.
Jetsun lame kutse rapten chin nam karatin le chokchur gepa dan losan tempe drume sas drowe munsela tautu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yenten rabzone dorje change kopa nyur toba sho nimo dele tsendele nime kunyan dele nintsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chinge lo kuncho sumke ngodro sumke trashi sho
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Tashidele. Have a good day. A good day to everyone.